welcome everybody back to the new era of Melanin Mysteries. And if this is your very first time here, I'm Tiffany, never Tiff, and I am your favorite Virgo cousin with a mic and baby. It is officially the United States of Virgo. All right. So shout out to all my Virgos and specifically shout out to my Virgo family, King Arthur over at Not My Brother's Keeper podcast and my big sis Renee over at Melanin Mayhem podcast. And again, if you're new around here, go check out the fam. Now, get comfortable, get settled in, and hopefully you don't mind a little cussing and laughter during true crime because that's how we do it around these parts. We're going to laugh, we're going to cut up, and somebody's going to get dragged. But through all of that, we still and will always honor the victim. I just have to put that little disclaimer out there early because I don't want anybody 5 minutes in clutching a pearl, shocked and appalled like I snuck up on you. I warned you at the door. Now, before we get into this case, I just got to run through a few announcements. First things first, please make sure you are following the podcast and sharing with anybody who has ears. And seriously, I got to say, I appreciate y'all so much because these numbers have been looking lovely lately. And I am so glad that y'all continue to show up and kick it with me week after week. And apparently, y'all are bringing friends with y'all. Keep doing that. Also, if you are enjoying the show, please take a second to leave me a 5-star review. And please keep in mind, it's Virgo season, so be nice. I will currently only be accepting 5 stars. Yes, thank you. Anything else, y'all know how to find me if you have a grievance, but just remember the same energy you slide into my inbox with is the same energy you'll probably get met with these days. Don't get me wrong, I do love feedback. I love constructive criticism. If I get something wrong, absolutely let me know. But some of y'all wake up in the morning, hear me mispronounce one word, and immediately go scorched earth. Baby, please keep in mind that I'm still human. I'm going to make mistakes. I try my best to catch everything during editing, but my God, I am just one woman. Like, I research, write, record, edit all by myself. I've been doing this for 2 years. Okay, so, if I fumble, mix up a date, or my tongue decides to clock up before the rest of me does, I would just appreciate a tiny sprinkle of grace. Now, with that being said, make sure you subscribe. That would be one of the absolute best birthday gifts you could give me. And your girl is turning the big 4. Oh, this is a big birthday. So let me tell you what subscribers get. Subscribers get early and ad-free episodes. There's some bonus episodes. And y'all already know I just dropped another bonus episode last week. And I got something new coming. So this Saturday, my subscribers are getting the very first episode of my newest segment. It's going to be called The Freedom Files Stolen Time. And with the Freedom Files, I want to focus specifically on wrongful convictions in the Black community. And if you have been here for a while, then you already know how this subject hits because one of my closest friends, her husband, at the time that he was released, was one of the longest serving wrongfully convicted people in U.S. history. He's not now, but he's still up there, which is horrible. So this really isn't just another true crime category I decided to cover. But listen, y'all know I'm going to put my spin on it, so it's going to be dope. And because of that, One Bad Night is going to be moving to once a month instead of twice a month so I can make room for the Freedom Files. So for now, I can't promise y'all the Freedom Files is even ever going to be on the main feed. So if you want to hear it, please make sure you're subscribed over on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And I have another smaller segment coming that will definitely remain subscriber only. And that one's going to be a lot more fun. Just go ahead and subscribe because, yeah. Now, we're also going to be working on a subscriber-only live virtual show for October. So I said, I'm over here working. I promise y'all. So let me go ahead and let's get into why y'all are actually here this week. And we have another cousin suggested case this week. So Sara Luna, cousin, I appreciate you. But, ma'am, you broke my heart real bad with this one. Y'all really do be sending me these ashy, knock-kneed, turtle-lip assholes and asking me to escort them directly to the pits of hell. Y'all do. And let me tell y'all something. It is truly my pleasure to provide that service. So make sure y'all coffee lid is secured. Make sure your edges is good. And get comfortable because, cousins, let me tell y'all what happened. So we're just going to go ahead and jump right in, and we're headed over to Grand Rapids, Michigan, March 19th, 2013. It's around 10:30 in the morning. The Grand Rapids Police Department, they done went to 47 Burton Street Southwest. They have a DV complaint. And the lady who called police was 26-year-old Latrice Maze. Now, when they get there, Latrice like, let me tell you something. My boyfriend, my baby daddy, his name is Jahleel Hoskins. We done got into it, and the nigga done grabbed me and pulled me to the back of the house. I was scared. So then here comes Jahleel. I ain't do nothing. I ain't touched that lady. Because apparently we're starting early with the I ain't do shit defense. And police looked over at Latrice. They like, I'm sorry, but we don't really see any visible injuries. We really can't say that anything has any physical assault has really taken place. So they didn't arrest anybody that day. And while they standing there, it's always one talking and one looking around. And one of them noticed like Latrice had her shit packed. They said it was plastic bags with clothes because Latrice had been planning to move out of the house that same day. And let me stop right there for just a second because no, having bags packed doesn't prove somebody committed a crime. But it does tell us that this was just not a, he left the toilet seat up and now I'm mad type situation. Like apparently Latrice had just reached a point where she was done enough to pack up her clothes and leave. So before the police left, they did try one more thing. They were like, just either one of you want to leave so everybody can cool off. Latrice's like, I'm not leaving my house. Jahleel like, well, shit, I ain't going nowhere either. And when the police asked if either of them feared for them safety, both of them said no. So they're like, okay. But, sometimes like there's moments in these cases where you could just wish you could reach backwards through time and grab somebody by the shoulders and say, baby, take them bags and go. But, that's hindsight. And those officers didn't know what we were about to find out at the time. So with no visible injuries, admissions, neither one of them saying they're going to leave or they're scared for their safety, police leave. And for the moment, that's it. Everybody goes on about their day. Except that Latrice Maze is about to vanish. And by the next day, March 20th, Latrice's family knows something is wrong. So Latrice has 5 kids. And she's supposed to pick up one of her daughters from school, but she never showed up. Now, listen, you can ignore a phone call. You can decide you don't want to talk to nobody that day. You can disappear into Home Goods for 3 hours and emerge with $187 worth of shit you absolutely never went in there for. Okay? But when you're a mama and there is somewhere you are consistently supposed to be for your child and then you don't show up, nobody can reach you and nobody knows where you are. And this is the days before you can track somebody's location. That's when your family starts saying something ain't right. So Latrice's family, they report her missing. And when Grand Rapids police hear the name Latrice Maze, they are like, oh, we just left that lady's house yesterday. And now less than 24 hours later, the woman who was standing in that house with bags packed, preparing to leave, that man can't be found. Now, I'm not Detective Benson or Detective Stabler. I'm just Detective Lightskinn with a microphone, some court docs, reasonably functioning common sense. But if I was just at your house yesterday because you said your boyfriend put hands on you, you had clothes packed and you was planning on leaving, and then the next day your family was reporting you missing, guess where the fuck I'm going first? Back to that house. Because police did. They went back to 47 Burton Street. They searching, they look around to see, if anything violent possibly happened. Initially, they didn't see anything. There was no obvious crime scene. Nothing sitting in the middle of the floor wearing a little neon sign that said a crime happened here. But Latrice is gone. So, of course, you're the closest one to her. They're going to start asking Jahleel questions. Because, sir, yesterday your girlfriend was here. Today nobody can find her. So where is she at? And Jaleel's only contribution to the investigation was basically, I don't know. He like, well, I had seen her yesterday, but I don't know where she went. Because apparently this 26-year-old mama of 5 just packed up her shit, missed picking up her daughter, stopped communicating with her family, and just, evaporated into Michigan air. Completely normal. And the man she's living with, the same man she said she was going to leave, the man police had called about less than 24 hours earlier, don't know shit. Okay. And at this point, they don't have enough to call this anything. They can't call it a homicide because they ain't got nobody. They don't have a crime scene. They don't have any proof that Jahleel did anything to her. All they have is a missing woman whose disappearance is becoming more concerning by the hour. But what Mr. Jahleel Hoskins don't know is that the people in his own circle who knew a whole hell of a lot more than he thought they did. And eventually, one of them was going to start snitching. Now, When Latrice was reported missing, she had last been seen around noon on March 19th, 2013, near the intersection of Burton Street and Division Avenue in Grand Rapids. She was wearing black pants, a white t-shirt, and a black, yellow, and green scarf around her head. After that, nothing. There were no more confirmed sightings, no card activity, no phone activity leading anybody to her. So before we go any further, I want to talk about Latrice because we're not about to spend this whole episode learning every dusty detail about Jahleel and leave Latrice sitting over there as just a 26-year-old mother of 5. No ma'am, no sir. Now, Latrice Renee Maze was born November 20th, 1986 to Wanda Rose and Julius Jackson. Her father described her as somebody who was always smiling, even when she had something going on. And clearly by March 2013, Latrice had some shit going on. She's trying to leave her relationship. She had her shit packed and police had just been called to her house. And, according to her daddy, she was still the type to put a smile on her face because she was big on family. She loved their Sunday gatherings, and apparently sis could cook too. And her family remembered her making the whole breakfast spread. Eggs, bacon, pancakes, wasn't no granola bar and good luck at school. She was in there cooking every morning, and I admire her so much. I do, because my kids, they got sausage and pancake thingy wrapped up. My kids love those. Pop-Tarts, yes. Yeah. Oh, so anyway, and then those little details, they matter because Latrice was somebody's daughter. She was somebody's cousin, somebody's friend, but most importantly, she was somebody's mama. Like I said, she had 5 kids. We know 3 of her daughters were Renee, Mariah, and Essie. And Renee was just 7 years old when her mama disappeared. And while everybody else was trying to figure out what happened to Latrice, these babies are just praying that their mama comes home. And that right there will break your heart. So Renee's father, his name was Roy Gillespie. He said Latrice had actually called him the day that she disappeared, but he didn't answer his phone because he was in class. So he later said that he wished he had stepped out and taken that call. But, how was he supposed to know? We ignore calls every day. Like, I'll call them back later. Ain't no big thing. Nobody thinks they're looking at the last phone call they'll ever get from somebody. Now, 2 of Latrice's other daughters, Mariah and Essie, they were fathered by a Kenneth Harris, and keep his name tucked away later because, baby, we're going to come right back around to him. At the time, Mariah had serious medical needs involving her heart and lungs and required a tracheostomy, while Essie was only 2. And I wasn't able to verify the names of Latrice's other 2 children through reliable reporting, so I'm going to just leave those babies who weren't publicly identified right where they are. But those 2 were Jahleel's kids. Now, Latrice's family knew her. They knew her habits. They knew where she was supposed to be. She always picked her daughter up from school around 3:30, and if she couldn't, she got her village. One of them were going to step in and help. So when Latrice doesn't show up and nobody can reach her, her family isn't buying the idea that this grown woman just woke up and decided, you know what? Fuck all them kids. I'm out. No, something's wrong. So her mama, Wanda, she said she couldn't eat or sleep. I don't blame her. And her auntie Victoria Ezel and cousin Laria Ezel were out there speaking publicly and trying to help find her. And eventually more than 100 people would gather to support Latrice. Family, friends, people who didn't even know her. Everybody just wanted the same thing. Bring this woman home. And while people are searching, her babies are waiting, and her mama is worried out of her damn mind. Guess who, still hanging around acting like he ain't know shit? Yeah, Jahleel. And before we dig any deeper into this, let me properly do the unfortunate introduction of Jahleel Amon Hoskins, because Sir did not just wake up in 2013 and decide to start making terrible life decisions. Jahleel was born July 17th, 1987, and by the time Latrice disappeared, baby, he already had a criminal record behind him. 2009, he was sentenced to prison on charges involving drugs, resisting and obstructing a police officer, carrying a concealed weapon, possession of a firearm by a felon. Basically, Sir had already been out here collecting charges like loyalty points. And he was released from prison in July 2011, less than 2 years before Latrice disappeared, and he was still on parole. And that's important because by early 2013, Jahleel had already found himself right back in some serious shit. Sir, sit the fuck down. Remember Kenneth Harris, the father of 2 of Latrice's daughters? Well, on February 18th, 2013, Kenneth and Jahleel were both at the Elks Club in Grand Rapids. I feel like something went down at the Elks Club in Grand Rapids in another case, but it's not coming to me right now. Now, the records I found didn't really spell out exactly what started the beef between these 2. We're not about to make this into a love and hip-hop storyline and tell y'all it was all over Latrice. But what we do know is that Jahleel did start the confrontation with Kenneth inside the club. And eventually, you know how that goes, it spills outside. And then Jahleel goes ahead and attacks Kenneth with a box cutter. Why he stabbed this man 5 times in his chest, arm, and back? Sir, whatever was said inside that club, I feel extremely confident in saying that none of it required arts and craft supplies. But thankfully, Kenneth did survive. But now Jahleel has himself in some shit, a very large problem. Like I said, he was already a convicted felon, and you only been outside since July 2011. You still on parole, my nigga. And now he has a brand new violent case hanging over his head for allegedly slicing up the father of 2 of Latrice's kids. Can't we just co-parent nicely? Now, by the time Latrice disappeared in March, like I said, these charges are still pending. Let's line this dusty little resume up. Prison record, parole, pending violent charges. If that Kenneth Harris case went badly, Jahleel knew exactly where his ass was going, back to jail. And then also, yeah, Latrice knew about that incident, of course. So later, the police came to believe that Jahleel was worried Latrice may give police information about his involvement in that stabbing. And, you know, considering he's already on parole, that info could have caused some very serious problems for him. Now, does any of this prove that Jahleel has something to do with Latrice disappearing? No, not yet. But it does give the investigator some very important context. Latrice was preparing to leave him. Police had been called to their home. Jahleel was already facing another violent case. And then less than a month after Kenneth Harris was stabbed, Latrice Maze disappears. So while Jahleel had all that legal smoke hanging over his head, like I said, she's still missing. And at this point, police have been back to that Bourbon Street house more than once trying to figure out what the hell happened after they left on March 19th. Jaleel's position is the same. You don't know? Okay. So this lady has just seemingly vanished off the face of Michigan. No card activity. Her phone wasn't giving anything because the battery was dead, so they couldn't ping it to figure out where it was. She hasn't picked up her baby. She's missed another appointment. Nothing about this looks like a woman who just packed a few bags, hopped on a Greyhound, and said, fuck them kids, I'm going to Florida. And Latrice's family, they knew this, so they kept pushing. They posting flyers. They having people searching. They doing vigils. You know, local media starts covering her disappearance. And y'all, it got enough attention that the Nancy Grace picked it up on April 8th, 2013. Now, y'all know Nancy Grace. And back in 2013, baby, if your missing person case made it to Nancy Grace, the national auntie with the helmet hair has clocked in. Her hairspray don't be playing. And one of the things her coverage highlighted was just how completely Latrice had gone dark after March 19th. Like I said, there was no credit or debit card activity. There was nothing. There were also reports that disturbing threats involving Latrice had appeared on Facebook, although exactly what those threats said and who posted them was not publicly disclosed. Now, this wasn't just Grand Rapids asking, has anybody seen Latrice? No, now the entire country is looking and people are hearing about it. Then we got Jaleel's wide mouth ass just sitting there looking stupid. Now on March 24th, when Fox 17 went to Latrice's family house to speak with her family, like I said, Jahleel just standing there just looking foolish. And April 1st, her family held a prayer vigil. Here comes Jahleel ass. You attending functions? Okay, let me behave, because at this point, Jahleel has not been charged with doing anything to Latrice. So technically, yes, your girlfriend is missing. You should be at the vigil. You should be helping. You should be concerned. But we also know that police have been called to that man's house the morning Latrice disappeared. We knew she had her bags packed and she was preparing to leave. And his ass is on fucking parole. And we knew he had a fresh violent case pending after allegedly carving up Kenneth Harris with a box cutter. So while I'm not convicting anybody from behind this microphone, I'm just watching your narrow ass. And apparently police was watching his narrow ass too. So days end up turning into weeks and there's still no Latrice. There's no sightings or, again, nothing is going on with her bank accounts. And there's literally nothing saying that she voluntarily started some brand new life without telling anybody. And her family is getting more scared by the day. The police are digging deeper into everybody around her. So we get to April 23rd, 2013. And this is where Jaleel's little streak of freedom comes to an end. Police end up taking him into custody on a parole hold, and he's being held without bond. So notice what I said. I said a parole hold. I didn't say anything about a murder or anything about Latrice. There's no body. There's no confirmed crime scene. And publicly, Latrice is still a missing woman. But now Jahleel is sitting his ass at the Kent County Jail. Which, considering that this little dusty criminal resume we just went through, sir, welcome back. You barely got your coat off from the last day. Okay. And like I said, he's sitting in jail. They still working. Just putting him behind bars and parole violation did absolutely nothing to answer the only question that Latrice's family cared about. So police are pulling apart Jahleel circle. Who had he talked to after March 19th? Who had he called? Who was he around? Who may know something that he wasn't telling police? And eventually, one name starts becoming important. They come across Gregory Shanklin. This is Jaleel's cousin. And this was one of them cousins, you just see twice a year at the cookout. For some reason, they had reason to believe, because they got an anonymous tip, that Jahleel and Gregory had been talking about Latrice. So naturally, they could all pull up on Gregory. Gregory, he got a few choices. He can, either tell what he knew, say he didn't know nothing, ask for a lawyer. All of these are available options. And, apparently Gregory looked at these choices and said, no, I'm a lie. Gregory lied during the investigation so badly, this man ends up getting charged with perjury. Sir, your cousin's girlfriend is missing and somehow you managed to get yourself locked up too? How did we get here? Because nobody was even looking for you for real. Your family tree needs to start to need its own public defender. So we got Jahleel sitting in jail on a parole hold, and Gregory done got himself jammed up because he ain't being truthful about what he knows. And that immediately creates another question. What the hell was Gregory trying so hard not to tell police? Ain't nobody catching a perjury charge over, I don't remember what we had for lunch. Like, they knew he was withholding something important. And by early May, oh baby, the entire temperature of Latrice's case has changed. By May 3rd, Latrice's family told Fox 17 that they had been informed her disappearance was now being treated as a homicide investigation. Now, Grand Rapids police would not publicly confirm that exact classification at the time, but they did acknowledge that Latrice's disappearance was believed to be criminal and that the investigators did not believe whatever happened to her was random. They believe whoever was responsible likely knew Latrice. Ooh, that had to hit her family like a brick. Because until somebody tells you otherwise, there's always a little tiny piece of hope. Maybe she left. Maybe she's scared. Maybe somebody has her. Maybe tomorrow the phone will ring or she'll walk through the door. But now her family is being forced to consider something completely different. They may not be searching for Latrice anymore. They may be searching for what happened to her. And just 4 days later, on May 7th, again, everything changed. The Kent County prosecutor authorized charges against Jahleel Hoskins for open murder and tampering with evidence in connection with Latrice's disappearance. Now, hold on, because we just made one hell of a jump. We went from missing woman to murder charge, but there's still one huge problem. Nobody knows where the fuck Latrice is. Like, they haven't found a body or remains. They don't have a grave, no autopsy. There's no Emmy telling them exactly how she died. But the prosecutors are confident enough to charge Jahleel with murder. So clearly somebody has started talking. Y'all remember Gregory, the cousin who somehow turned somebody else missing person investigation to his own perjury case? Well, police are starting to learn that Gregory knew a hell of a lot more than he initially admitted. And later, investigators would even get an explanation for why Gregory may have been lying in the first place. Because while Jahleel was sitting in the Kent County jail, police had a whole nother operation going. They put an inmate around Jahleel who was wearing a wire. Baby, they was on top of it. And Jahleel, oh baby, he was talking and talking and talking. Y'all be talking about women gossip. Y'all be talking shit. Shut up. So eventually, investigators collected more than 100 hours of recorded conversation. Do y'all know how much talking? 100 hours? This man was in jail producing a limited series podcast nobody asked for. 100 hours? That's like 80 episodes that y'all would have listened to of this podcast here. Like 80 episodes. Come on now. Full-length episode. Golly. That's it. And during one of these conversations, Jahleel starts talking about Gregory. He explained that he had already spoken to his cousin about what Gregory should say if police came asking questions. Basically, according to these recordings, he's talking about, and this is a direct quote, they're probably going to come for me eventually. Here's how you need to handle it. Excuse me, most innocent people never need to schedule a family meeting titled, What to Say If Homicide Comes Knocking. And yet somehow Jahleel had apparently already prepared Gregory for police questioning. And Gregory, dumbass, follows along with the program, at least for a little while. Because when police initially question him, he lies. So now Gregory's sitting in jail dealing with consequences of his own. And suddenly that loyalty package is starting to look a little less attractive. Because Gregory eventually starts telling the investigators what Jahleel had allegedly told him about Latrice. And these weren't vague conversations, about like relationship problems. It wasn't like one of them, like, me and man, excuse me, it wasn't like, damn, me and my girl is going through it. Like, she about to leave me. Now, Gregory was about to tell police things that, if true, could explain why Latrice Maze had vanished without leaving a single trace. May 22nd, 2013, Jahleel appears in court for his preliminary hearing. And baby, when I tell y'all, this hearing was a mess. So like I said, the first major witness to take the stand is none other than Cousin Gregory. And like I said, Gregory comes into court wearing that same blue jumpsuit as Jahleel because he's locked up too after lying in his investigation. So it's just a family affair. But nobody brought the potato salad. And Gregory, he does not appear particularly excited to be there telling the family business. Now, reports described him as reluctant and visibly troubled on the stand. Y'all, he looks stressed, honey. He looks stressed. You could just see him. He was up there rubbing his head. Niggas start rubbing their head when they get to line and they stressed and shit, right? They all do the same thing. But, eventually he does start talking. And Gregory was like, look, about 2 weeks after Latrice disappeared, Jahleel told him what happened. Gregory testified that Jahleel had been worried about Latrice because of that pending case involving Kenneth Harris. And remember, Jahleel on parole when he's stabbing up folks. Jahleel believed whatever was going on between him and Latrice could affect that parole. Now, Gregory then said something that changes the entire temperature of that courtroom. He says that after police came to the Burton Street house on March 19th, Jahleel started thinking about killing Latrice. And when the prosecutor asked Gregory whether Jahleel actually told him that, Gregory was like, yes. So we have officially crossed over because up until now, we have had circumstances, a domestic violence call, packed bag, missing woman, boyfriend with a criminal record, a pending violent case, a cousin lying his ass off. Suspicious? Absolutely, but suspicion is not proof. Now we have Jaleel's own cousin sitting under oath saying, this man told me he was thinking about killing her. And Gregory he wasn't done. According to his testimony, Jahleel told him that he choked Latrice at their house. Then Jahleel wrapped her body in a sheet that he took from one of his daughter's beds. And that pissed me smooth off because if it wasn't enough that these babies were about to lose their mama, you allegedly went into one of their beds and took their sheets and used to wrap up their mama. Jahleel, you are officially the stale Funyun in a wet sock. Gregory then testified that Jahleel told him he put Latrice in a garbage container at the Peppercorn Apartments in Wyoming, Michigan. And that explains that tampering with evidence charge. But Gregory wasn't the only person Jahleel had apparently been talking to, because next we meet one of Jaleel's friends, Destin Peak. Now, Destin lived at the Peppercorn Apartments, and according to Destin's testimony, Jahleel contacted him on March 19th, the same day that Latrice disappeared. And Jahleel wanted to know about the trash situation at Destin's apartment complex. Why are you conducting a waste management survey all of a sudden? You ain't ever cared what day trash was before. And this ain't even your apartment building. But according to Destin, Jaleel's questions started to sound, a little bit more psycho. But according to Destin, Jaleel's conversation started to sound a little bit more psycho. So Destin testifies that Jahleel told him, I did her. And then he said he needed help because he couldn't carry her by himself. And Destin says that later, Jahleel met him at a convenience store on Eastern Avenue, but he was real calm. He was like, real matter of fact about the whole thing. Which, if, your girlfriend, the mom of two of your children is allegedly dead and you're discussing this shit like you're trying to figure out who has a pickup truck available Saturday morning, absolutely the fuck not. So now investigators have two different people in Jaleel's circle snitching and telling versions of the same basic ass story. So Gregory says Jahleel admitted killing Latrice and told him where he disposed of her. Destin says Jahleel called him the day she disappeared, asking about dumpsters and talk about he need help carrying the body. Don't call me. Do not call me. I'm not coming. Matter of fact, I'm going to tell you I'm coming, but the police going to meet you where we were supposed to be met at because I'm not I don't need a felony behind my name. I'm scary. I can't go to prison. Concealing a body, that scares me. No, thank you. I don't need them charges. The charges scare me, not the body, the charges. But it's my sidebar. So, like I said, at this point, these are not random neighborhood rumors. These people know Jahleel personally. They talking to him. He's his homies, his niggas, his friends, his family. But again, the biggest problem Jahleel had was Jahleel. Because while people were building this case through witnesses, they're also listening to this man who can't shut the fuck up build a case against himself. Because remember, we had that wired inmate in the county jail. Like I said, 100 hours of Jahleel talking. You talking this man's ear off. Shit, did you let the man sleep? Like I said, his dumbass is in there producing the extended director's cut of his own prosecution. And like I said, one of these conversations happened on May 1st. That's 6 days before Jahleel was even charged with her murder. And during this conversation, Jahleel starts talking about Gregory. And like I said, he had told the inmate that he already talked to Gregory about what he needed to tell the police if they questioned him. And on the recording, Jahleel essentially told Gregory at some point, even though he believed the police didn't have a case, they're probably going to arrest him for the murder. If you knew this, why would you? Whatever. So, like I said, he's sitting here giving Gregory a pep talk on what to say. And that explains why Gregory had been lying. Gregory didn't just wake up and decide to freestyle himself into perjury for recreational purposes. As I said, according to Jaleel's own recorded conversation, he had coached his cousin on how to handle it. And you sitting your ass up in jail talking to another inmate about a murder police haven't even charged you with yet, explaining how you prepared a witness for questioning, while the inmate you're talking to is wired. You don't know who the fuck you're talking to. Y'all must not watch true crime. Don't pay attention to nothing because y'all don't think somebody gonna snitch on you what they owe you. Ugh. There are dumb decisions, there are bad decisions, and then there's whatever the hell Jahleel was doing. Baby, you out here just handing out brochures. You just bad as that nigga from last week. My God. Y'all just be going on these press runs, which is baffling to me. I don't want to hear nobody say women gossip too much. I don't want to hear that shit no more. Anyway, after all of this testimony, it finally answers the question Latrice's family has been asking for 2 months. Where is she? Except, like I say, now the investigators believe they have the answers to the question, which is almost worse than not knowing. Because, like I said, they believe the dumpster at the Peppercorn Apartments had already been emptied before anyone knew where to search. And once that trash is collected, they believe that Latrice's remains were likely incinerated. So there's probably nothing left to recover. Her family can't bring a body home and give her a funeral and properly lay her to rest. There's going to be no grave containing her remains. And that is when this case becomes especially cruel, because Jahleel wasn't just accused of taking Latrice's life. If investigators were right, he had also taken her body away from the people who loved her. So at this point, prosecutors have one hell of a case taking shape. They got Gregory's ass snitching, saying Jahleel done confessed. They got Destin snitching, Jahleel calling him the same day Latrice disappeared, asking about dumpsters and saying he need help carrying her. Y'all got 100 hours of recorded jail conversations. And now a judge has heard enough. By June 2013, Jahleel is ordered to stand trial for open murder and tampering with evidence in Latrice's death. But there is still one gigantic elephant sitting in the middle of the courtroom. They do not have Latrice. They don't have a body, a remains, an autopsy. They can't put a medical examiner up on the stand, telling them exactly how Latrice died. And contrary to what TV has taught some folks, you can absolutely prosecute a murder without a body. It's harder, but you can do it. Because the question isn't necessarily, can you show me the body? The question is, can the prosecution prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this person is dead and the defendant caused the death? And the prosecution believed that they absolutely could. Because, like I said, apparently Jahleel has spent months after Latrice disappearing, leaving little breadcrumbs everywhere like the world's dumbest Hansel and Gretel. You done told your cousin, you done told your friend, you've been talking to inmates in jail. You over here discussing coaching witnesses, asking questions about trash disposal. And then apparently decided, you know what this investigation needs? More weird shit. So police discovered that Latrice's Facebook page, her account had been changed after they believed she had already been dead. A week after she disappeared, on Facebook, her relationship status reportedly changed from in a relationship to separated. Now, you mean to tell me that this woman has not touched her bank card, picked up her babies, nobody has heard from her, but somehow Facebook has entered its complicated era? Sir, please. And the investigators wanted to know who had access to that account and who was making changes after she had already disappeared. And that wasn't the only issue with people around Jahleel giving police bullshit. Now, remember, Gregory wasn't the only one catching heat for lying under investigation. There was another relative of Jahleel's. Her name was Tashara Brown. She ended up charged with perjury too after giving a false statement under oath. Yeah. So Tashara reportedly spent about 2 months in the Kent County jail before agreeing to cooperate and testify truthfully at Jahleel's trial. Y'all, when the family-sponsored obstruction package is happening here, how many relatives are we sending to jail behind one stale Funyun? Because at some point, somebody at the cookout need to stand up and say, you know what? I love y'all, but can everybody tell the fucking truth before this entire family gets matching DLC numbers? And meanwhile, like I said, Jahleel still got that other case sitting there waiting on him. Because remember, Latrice's murder case wasn't the only courtroom he had to worry about. He still had to answer for what he did when he sliced up Kenneth Harris. Now, in October 2013, a jury found Jahleel guilty of assault with intent to do great bodily harm for attacking Kenneth with that box cutter. The jury also convicted him of perjury. Because when Jahleel had previously been questioned under oath about the Elks Club attack, he denied being at the club that night and denied having any altercation with Kenneth. And the jury was like, yeah, cut the shit. So court records say Jahleel had initiated the confrontation with Kenneth and then attacked him outside the club, leaving Kenneth with 5 stab wounds to his chest, arm, and back. And because Jahleel qualified as a 4th offense habitual offender, that conviction came with some serious time. Now, for that charge, he was eventually sentenced to 25 to 75 years for the assault. For the perjury, 260 months to 50 years. God damn, for perjury? For lying? Niggas lying, baby. Shit. So, this is all before Latrice's murder trial even gets rolling. He's looking at decades in prison. And remember, I told y'all this man was terrified that the Kenneth Harris case would send him back to prison. Well, congrats, beloved. You played yourself. But Latrice's case was still coming. And prosecutors made it something very clear during the summer of 2013. They were willing to discuss a plea, but there was a condition. If Jahleel wanted any consideration from the prosecution, they wanted the truth about what happened to Latrice. Where was she? What exactly happened? What did he do with her body? Because at the center of all this evidence and charges and the witnesses and all this man running his mouth, there was still a mom who had never been brought home. And the prosecutors weren't interested in letting this man bargain his way into a nicer deal while Latrice's family still had no place to bury her. So the case kept moving forward to trial. And in December 2013, Jahleel Hoskins finally took his seat in the Kent County Circuit Court to face murder charges. And remember, he's facing open murder. And what open murder means in Michigan is that the prosecution does not have to decide before the trial whether the jury must consider only first or second degree murder. The evidence can support the appropriate degree. And Jahleel had a real problem here because if the jury found that this murder was premeditated, first degree murder in Michigan is already mandatory life without parole. So ain't no, maybe I'm coming home when I'm 70. There ain't going to be no parole board speech. No elderly Jahleel shuffling through prison gates with a clear property pack. No elderly Jahleel shuffling through the prison gate with a clear plastic property bag. No, baby. You live there now. That is your last known residence, and you're going to die there, too.
Hi, Ryan Reynolds here for Mint Mobile. Are you looking for a beach read this summer? May I suggest your big wireless bill? It's got suspense, mystery, a slightly flat, emotional arc, and a shocking twist where you realize you've been overpaying the entire time. Fortunately, though, Mint's story is better. Every plan, $15 a month. Even unlimited. That's it. Happy ending. Zero tears.
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan required. $15 per month equivalent. Taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Greater than 50 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. See terms.
And prosecutors absolutely had a theory of premeditation. Their position was that Jahleel killed Latrice because she was going to give police info connecting him to the Kenneth Harris stabbing. So, according to the prosecution, an argument that suddenly went too far, no. Jahleel had a motive, and the nigga was on parole. He attacked Kenneth, and Latrice knew about it. And the girl was pregnant to leave him. So, Gregory then testifies that Jahleel said he had thought about killing her after police came to the house. That's context. Because I lost control for a second, and I thought about killing her and then did it. Those are two very different neighborhoods when you're talking about premeditation. And when Jahleel's murder trial begins, the witnesses, they are coming in and the evidence is coming in. And, you got the state laying out what they believe happened to Latrice inside that house. And you know what? Apparently, by day 2 of his trial, Mr. Ain't no case, Mr. They ain't got nothing, Mr. Let me coach my cousin. Yeah, I guess he had seen enough. Because on December 11, 2013, right in the middle of his own murder trial, he changes his plea. He ends up pleading guilty to second-degree murder. And there it was. After months of denying involvement and showing up while Latrice's family searched and attending her vigil and telling people he didn't know where she was, after her family had to watch witnesses describing what allegedly happened to her, Jahleel finally admits that he killed Latrice Maze. What the plea did was it allowed him to avoid the possibility that the jury would convict him of first-degree murder, which would have meant mandatory life in prison without the possibility of parole. Now, Jahleel's version, he claimed that Latrice's death was not intentional. And according to him, the two of them were just arguing. And things, they just got out of control. I hate when they do that. We don't believe you, sir. You need more people. But the prosecutor, they had said they had an entirely different interpretation of events. They were like, this was a deliberate strangulation motivated by Jahleel's fear that Latrice was going to tell police what she knew about the attack on Kenneth. And that was the problem with the whole it had just happened type situation. Strangulation is not somebody tripping over a shoe and accidentally knocking somebody down. It takes time. Like, it takes minutes. I believe they said it can be anywhere from 3 to 10 minutes. That's a long time for real. That you have your arms wrapped around somebody's neck and you're looking at them and you keep applying pressure. That is personal. You have so many opportunities to stop. And like you said, we had Gregory's testimony where he said he was thinking about killing her. So you can take that blink of an eye defense, fold it into a paper airplane, and fly that shit directly into Lake Michigan. And even after finally admitting that he killed her, there was still one thing that he could not give Latrice's family. He couldn't give them Latrice because her body was gone. Investigators still believe she had been thrown away with the trash and likely incinerated, which meant Latrice's parents and her 5 kids were heading into Jahleel's sentencing knowing exactly who killed her, but still unable to bring her home. And if you think Jahleel Hoskins finally walked into that sentencing humble, quiet, grateful he had avoided mandatory life without parole and preparing to accept the consequences of his actions, you have clearly forgot who the fuck we were talking about. Because on January 6, 2014, this Dale Funyun was about to turn the courtroom into Monday Night Raw. So here we are. January 6, 2014. We all hate that day. Sentencing day. And this moth-mouthed walking piece of shit walks into Judge James Robert Redford's courtroom already knowing one thing, that he's going to prison. The only question is for how long. Now remember, Jahleel had already pled guilty to second-degree murder, which spared him from possibility of first-degree murder conviction and mandatory life without parole. And before the judge hands down that sentence, Latrice's family finally gets their turn to speak. So her mom, Wanda Rose, addresses the court, and baby, Wanda had every right to let that man have it. She talked about having to explain Latrice's disappearance to her grandchildren. Those babies lost their mom, and they couldn't even be given the small comfort of knowing where she was. And then Wanda brought something we talked about earlier, how Jahleel is joining in the searches after Latrice disappeared and attending vigils. And you standing around Latrice's family while they're looking for her. And Wanda looked at him and was like, you killed my daughter, then went back to her house and had a party. What kind of person does that? And that right there tells you how deeply this man's behavior disturbed her family. Because it disturbs my spirit too. Because imagine your daughter is missing, you're terrified, praying and searching, and the person responsible is standing around watching the entire thing unfold. It's sick. And then pathetic Patrick gets his opportunity to speak, and then suddenly here come the tears. Of course they do. Now, Jahleel tells Latrice's family he's sorry. You can take that sorry and stick it up your ass. Sorry. He says that he loved her deeply, and he insists that he never meant to kill her. So why didn't you stop? And then he tells the judge that before all this happened, everybody thought he was a good person. And then he says, in the blink of an eye, now everybody sees him as a monster. Fool, let me stop you right there. This is where I need offenders to stop acting like they slipped on a banana peel and landed in prison. This was not I blinked and suddenly I had 50 years. There were multiple exits before we arrived here. You could have walked away from the argument. You could have stopped putting your hands around her neck. You could have called for help. Told the police where her body was. Told the truth at literally any point between March and January. Instead, you strangled this woman, disposed of her body, lied about it, coached your cousin, attended her vigil, and then spent enough time running your mouth in jail to produce 100 hours of bonus content. So you know what? Spare me the Hallmark monologue. And prosecutors weren't particularly moved either. Now, Assistant Kent County Prosecutor Kelly Conchi argued that Jahleel's eventual confession should not earn him some giant gold star. Because yes, you finally admitted to killing Latrice, but that was only after your trial had started and the evidence was being laid out in front of him. Like, you're just trying to avoid mandatory life. We don't feel bad for you. This is not like, my conscience became too heavy and I needed to tell the truth. That's more shit. They might actually convict me of first-degree murder. So Conchi maintained that this was not some accidental death during an argument, and the prosecution's position remained that Jahleel deliberately strangled Latrice because he was afraid she would tell police about his involvement in the attack on Kenneth Harris. And then Judge Redford addressed something I think is one of the cruelest parts of this entire case. It was what he did with Latrice afterward. The judge pointed out that disposing of her body in the garbage already made an already horrific crime even worse. And then with it ultimately being incinerated. And by doing that, Jahleel took something else from her family. They couldn't have the traditional funeral or bury her or stand by her grave and know that she's here. Her children couldn't grow up and visit their mother's resting place. Her parents couldn't put flowers beside their daughter's headstone. Jahleel didn't just take Latrice's life. He took away their ability to bring her home. And Judge Redford was not about to pretend that didn't matter. So the sentence comes down for the second-degree murder of Latrice Maze, baby, 50 to 100 years in prison. And for tampering with evidence, 12 to 50 years. Now, don't forget, Jahleel had already been sentenced to 25 to 75 years for stabbing Kenneth Harris. So regardless of how you slice this little prison casserole, his ass was cooked. And apparently that is when all those tears dried up with remarkable speed. Because the moment Jahleel hears that 50 to 100-year sentence, baby, the stale Funyun became airborne. Jahleel is handcuffed, standing there in court, and this man throws the reading table or podium towards Judge Redford's bench and starts moving in the judge's directions. Now, reports do differ on whether they call it a podium or reading table or a table, but the important part is this fool started throwing courtroom furniture. Like, y'all, you gotta go on YouTube and look it up. Child, it was a mess. Like, I didn't know the fool could move that fast. Like, how he got up out that damn seat, I said, well, shit. Now, sir, 30 seconds ago, I loved her. I'm sorry. Now everybody thinks I'm a monster. Judge says 50 years and suddenly it's WWE Kent County Circuit Court edition. And I just know Judge Redford was somewhere behind that bench thinking, well, thank you for immediately demonstrating why I just gave your ass 50 years. So court deputies grab Jahleel. They drag his ass about the courtroom. He hooting and hollering. And, like I said, they drag this. Just so fucking disrespectful, man. And because apparently the foolishness needed one final encore, the families get to arguing too. Like, members of Jahleel's family and members of Latrice's family, they yelling back and forth. Oh, they about to tear up this goddamn courtroom. And then they have more deputies come into the courtroom to separate everybody. And at one point, listen, y'all, Jahleel's mama is yelling at one of Jahleel's cousins to shut up, while the judge is just banging his gravel, trying to restore order. Child, just a mess, man. Maybe this courtroom had turned into somebody's auntie's living room after Thanksgiving. I'm surprised ain't nobody get their wigs snatched off, y'all. I mean, everybody yelling, the judge is banging the gavel, the deputies is everywhere, and, Jahleel already done got dragged out because he wanted to launch furniture at the bench. But thankfully, y'all, nobody was injured. It was just a scene, but maybe nobody was injured, but maybe the dignity of the Kent County court system. I mean, but y'all know what really gets me about Jahleel losing his mind over that sentence? This man had just been giving something that he never gave Latrice. A future. Yes, his future was behind bars, and he was going to spend decades there, the rest of his life. But he would still wake up the next morning, eat, talk to his family, receive mail, make phone calls, grow older. And Latrice, she got none of that. Her children got none of that with their mother. And he had the audacity to become enraged because of the consequences for taking all of that from her was too much for him. Boy, if you don't get your great value, Incredible Hulk ass out that hole, get back in that holding cell, I know something. Like, ugh. And ultimately, that 50 to 100-year sentence stuck. Now, his separate sentence in the Kenneth Harris case was also upheld on appeal, and the Michigan Court of Appeals noted that the 50-year minimum sentence in Latrice's murder case essentially made his challenge to the other sentence a moot point anyway. Basically, the courts was like, in far more professional language, sir, you ain't going nowhere. And while Jahleel Hoskins would eventually spend the coming decades knowing exactly where he was, Latrice's family still had one painful question unanswered. They don't know where Latrice is. And that brings us where things stand today. Jahleel Amon Hoskins remains in the custody of the Michigan Department of Corrections, serving the decades of time he earned for killing Latrice, disposing of her body in that separate attack on Kenneth Harris. His earliest release date is January 5th, 2064. Y'all, he was born in 1987. And if he ever walks out on that possible date, this Dale Funyun will be 76 years old. And let me be clear. January 5th, 2064 does not mean somebody has a car roaming up outside that prison waiting on him. That is just simply the earliest date he could potentially be released. His maximum discharge date, January 4th, 2115. Baby, by then we're going to have flying Buicks and hologram child support before that date gets here. So when the Michigan Court of Appeals basically says that his other sentencing complaints weren't going to make much difference because of the time he was already serving for Latrice, they weren't lying. Sir, just go ahead and get that bunk and that ass comfortable. And normally this is where I would tell you where the victim was laid to rest in the cemetery or whatever. But like I said, her family never got that because her remains were never recovered. That part just sticks to me because it's just... Taking a life is already unforgivable, but to rob her kids and her parents and everybody who loved her a chance to bring her home and properly lay her to rest. Like I said, for years, they didn't even have a grave to visit. And in 2015, Latrice's family finally received a memorial plaque in her honor. And her daughter, Renee, who was only 7 when her mom disappeared, was there for the unveiling. And people kept telling Renee how much she looked like Latrice. And when she was asked how she felt about looking like her mama, she said she liked it. And that, baby, is Latrice's legacy. Not Jahleel, not that Burton Street house or a dumpster or a courtroom tantrum, and not this raggedy-ass man throwing furniture because somebody finally handed him the consequence of his own actions. Her babies, her family, those Sunday gatherings, those big breakfasts, that smile her daddy says she kept on her face even when she was going through something. That is who Latrice Renee Maze was. She was 26 years old, a daughter, a mom of 5, a woman who had packed her things and was preparing to make a change in her life. And she deserved the opportunity to make it. And Jahleel's raggedy ass took that away from her. So yes, Jahleel Hoskins may have the earliest release date of January 5th, 2064, but Latrice, she should have gotten 2064 too. She should have been celebrating her 40th birthday this year. Gotten gray hair, grandbabies, bad knees, AARP mail. She should have gotten to complain about these damn kids and tell everybody she wasn't cooking Sunday dinner this week, knowing good and goddamn well she was going to cook anyway. She should have gotten old. And that's why I don't give a damn how many tears pathetic Patrick produced in that courtroom. You weren't worried about losing your freedom. Latrice lost everything. And for the rest of his days, I hope that his coffee is always cold. I hope that his bread is always stale. I hope they turn his ass every which way but loose. I hope nobody puts a dime on his commissary. I hope that his shower water is always cold. I hope that he has post-nasal drip every single day for the remainder of his days for what he did to that woman. And on that note, because that is a tragic story of Latrice Maze and Jahleel Hoskins. And as always, I would love to know what y'all think. Would you believe Jahleel would have ever admitted what he did if that trial hadn't started closing in on him? And how the hell do you attend a vigil and stand beside a woman's family knowing you're the reason that everybody is out there looking for her? Because that's just a level of cold I just will never understand. So if you have forgotten and you have made it this far, please make sure that you are following Melanin Mysteries on all platforms. You can find me on social media, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, on Melanin Mysteries Podcast. You can join the Facebook discussion group, Love, Lies, and Alibis. And make sure you share this episode with anybody who has ears. And if you enjoyed the episode, leave your favorite Virgo those 5 stars. And if you want early ad-free episodes, bonus content, the Freedom File Stolen Time, and everything else I've got cooking for subscribers, you can subscribe right through Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And until next time, cousins, keep your coffee lid secure, your edges laid. And remember, sometimes the devil you need to worry about isn't hiding in the shadows. Sometimes he's standing right there beside you, helping you search. And always remember, Hearts break, but alibis don't.